Welcome to Monster Power In-Depth number 2. Today we feature Seth Doulton, responsible for the Skull Bandit trucks, the Copenhagen Crusher series of trucks, the AM/PM vehicles, Flying Eagle, quite a few, acquired some other trucks over the years. Gave us a lot of really good insight into his career, which was sort of unconventional in the sport and still really continues to be. Coming weeks, we've got Tracy Smart. Of course, next time we'll have Scott Stevens, Army Armstrong, and of course Marty Garza. So I hope you continue to enjoy this series of interviews. Here now is Seth Doulton.
All right, thanks for letting us have some of your time tonight, Seth.
No problem. I appreciate talking about something that I spent a lot of my life dealing with, working on.
Now, to jump right in, and I usually start with how you got into motorsports, but you had kind of an unorthodox way of getting into monster trucks. So how did you get into motorsports, and what drew you to monster trucks?
Well, it's a little bit of a long story, but I'll try to cut it short. What happened was I knew Walt Garrison when I rodeoed, and I was rodeoing and working in rodeos and stuff. And so Walt Garrison, who used to play for the Dallas Cowboys and was a vice president with U.S. Tobacco Company, invited me to a motocross show at the Rose Bowl. And when I went to the motocross show at the Rose Bowl, I was in the U.S. Tobacco Company suite and everything. So they asked me what I was doing, and I said I was building I had a mail order business now and was building old model Chevrolet trucks, show trucks for magazines and stuff like that. So this was probably about 1983, something like that, 83, 4. And I could look up the exact date. But so he said, they were getting ready to launch a brand new tobacco product called Skull Bandits, which was a little pouch of like a tea bag of tobacco to put in your mouth.
Right.
And he goes, could you build something that we could take around to car shows and county fairs to get some attention, blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that. I said, sure. In fact, I was building a panel truck at the time that I had halfway done. So I showed him some pictures of the panel truck I was building, and he goes, could that be a Skull Bandit panel truck? Well, 3 months later, it was a Skull Bandit panel truck, all painted red and green, and we took it to autoramas all from coast to coast and county fairs, and Earl Campbell was signing autographs in the booth. And back in those days, they just sampled tobacco. Anybody that walked up to the booth, they didn't ask how old you were or whatever. They just hand out these little sample packets of tobacco. This is like 83, 84 now. So anyway, after he was on the road for about 6 months, they called me up and said, hey, we love this. We want to do more vehicles. What can we do to really get some attention? What can we do to... And I said, well, they're kind of building monster trucks. There's this whole craze about monster trucks. And, maybe we should build a monster truck. Just never, ever seen one in person before. Mm-hmm. But I knew that Jim Reese that worked for me, he could build anything, So he goes, that sounds good, And so this is a true story. We went to an Anaheim car show RG Canning car show where the Skull Bandit panel truck was on display, and King Kong was there. And King Kong was the only monster truck I'd seen in person at this time, up to this point. And it had an air compressor running to 2 of the tires because it had plugs in the tires, so it just had an air compressor running all the time to keep air in the tires, And this was the brown King Kong. I don't know if it wasn't Awesome Kong. It was the original King Kong or whatever. Right. So Jimmy and I and another Jim from U.S. Tobacco Company looked at it. Jimmy goes, oh man, he goes, I can't, he says, we can do this and more, And so this is the God's truth. We had a cameo already in the house, in our shop. And he says, hey, we can use this 50, with the 58 cameo. Right. And so, I just put a 58 front clip on it, but it didn't really matter at that point because we were cutting it all up anyway. And then we actually walked from King Kong right down the aisleway, and there was a guy there that was taking and putting 350 motors and Jaguar XKEs and stuff, and taking the Jaguar V12 out and souping them up for race boats, for speedboats. So here we are. We're 10 minutes into this project, right? We stop at this booth, and I said, hey, and I didn't say we want it. I said, we're building a blah-blah this, blah-blah that, Skull Bandit monster truck. Would you like to have a Jaguar motor in there? He goes, I'd love it. I'll donate the motor. And we called Art Carr up, and Art Carr says, yeah, I'll give you all the transmissions you need. And it just kind of took off from there. We talked to Boyce. Boyce got, of course, back then it was 5-ton axles. That it was pretty much over that weekend, we put the deal together and just kind of estimated the costs. And U.S. Tobacco Company said, hey, we'll write a check. Just tell us what it's going to cost. Sounds great. And, of course, we got the Skull Bandit on the road. And 6 months into having it on the road, they wanted a second truck. And then we did the Copenhagen Skull Crusher. In fact, they wanted it so fast. That's why we bought the Cardiff Giant, because they wanted a truck on the road right away. And so it was easier to buy that, rebadge it as a Skull Crusher for a few months while we were building the Copenhagen Skull Crusher. Because, with sponsors, they pay you the day you get it on the road. And, a lot of it was displays. So, the faster we could get it out there and on display, the happier they were. But anyway, that's the story. So and every truck we either bought or built was pretty much the opposite for most people. Like most people go, I'm building a race truck and then I'm going to go find a sponsor. It was usually that we already had a sponsor, whether it be Goodyear or GMC or whoever, that said, hey, we want to Dodge a truck, and then we'd build a truck for them. So it never was that we did get a passion for it after we built them, but it never was that the passion didn't drive the business. The business drove the passion.
Did acquiring sponsorship become easier once people saw what you guys could build, what you and Jim could get out there?
I'm going to say that, and I've been involved in selling sponsorships my whole life, and I'm still involved in it actually. And I've been with rodeo. Sponsors are pretty easy to get and to satisfy if you understand what they want out of the sponsorship. Very few sponsors, and they were gone in the 80s, of people that just want their name on the side of a vehicle or a race car or whatever. I mean, when you see the NASCAR cars that have sponsors, those people do a whole lot more for that sponsor, whether it be Office Depot or Tide or whatever it is. They create a whole program where Tide or Office Depot or these different people feel like they're really getting their money's worth. There's a real return on investment. So I don't know if it got easier. It was fairly easy because, like AMPM, we knew their trigger point was to have trucks at their locations on display. So those drivers that were driving Meredith drove the AMPM Boss, but she didn't do the displays because obviously that was untiring and tiring the truck twice a day.
Right.
So they understood that, hey, if we can do 15 displays in a week, they're really happy. And so we're really happy because they gave us $1,500 back in the day for doing a display. So each truck was making $3,000 a day being on display at these different locations. So I think that we kind of kept them in the racing scene, like with SRO Pace and stuff, enough to keep their name out there so people would want to come and see them. And that might be a little bit of, like the Raminator, he's had a really good luck nowadays with his sponsorship, and I'm sure he's been really good with Ram Trucks. I know those people at Ram Trucks. But he's been able to do it because he works a lot of farm progress shows. He really works the truck on displays.
Right.
And so he's gotten that exposure. But back in those days, you had to race it a little bit to get exposure to be something that somebody wants to get their picture next to. You know what I mean? So there's kind of a fine mix, but we definitely didn't want to tear the trucks up or turn them over on the weekends like they do at Monster Jam.
Right.
Because we had a display. We could make more money at the display on Monday morning than we did at winning the races on Sunday. You know what I mean?
Right. Now, so you had the AM/PM boss. How did the AM/PM deal come about, and how did that end up being becoming the second truck, Rocket?
Well, it was kind of the same thing as the two trucks for Skoll. Early on, we figured out that, I think we were the first, I'm not bragging or just facts. I think we were the first people that had nationally corporate sponsored monster trucks, other than the brand. I think Bigfoot did some work for Ford, but we built the truck for these companies. And I think we were like one of the first people that hauled two monster trucks at one time. I know Mike Welch did, but that was something we figured out right away, that, hey, we can haul two trucks and two drivers can stay in the same room. And you can run a two-truck race team for about 10% more than having individual trucks, So that was one thing that we didn't mind when the sponsor said, well, we want a second truck. Because even though the second truck might go to different locations, we could still haul them into the communities on the same rig. You understand?
Right.
So that actually came by. Meredith actually sold that sponsorship. She happened to be and this has always happened. For sponsorships, it's kind of not what you know, it's who you know, and being at the right place at the right time, and meeting the right person at the right time, and everything. But she was on the Tom Flores golf tournament for the Raiders when they were in L.A., and she was on the committee, and she was set up. She was on the board with Lord Cook, who was the CEO of ARCO. So they got ARCO, which is AM/PM.
Right.
He's the big guy. He's the president of the board, CEO of ARCO. So they're talking at a board meeting one day, oh, what do you do, whatever. And so she showed him a picture of the monster trucks we're involved in. So she goes, hey, we ought to build a monster truck for AM/PM. And he just fired back at her, well, if you drive it, I'll sponsor it. And she goes, okay. She'd never driven a monster truck. She'd been around him and everything. So she called me up and she goes, hey, guess what I just did? Blah, blah, this. And I said I'd drive it. I go, hey, no problem. We'll build a truck that you can drive well. So it was a pretty exciting time for us. And that deal came together real fast. We had a truck on the road. That was the first 72 truck we built.
Right.
And then we built the Boss for them, and it was the same thing with U.S. Tobacco Company. It was on the road for about 6 months, and I can't even remember, don't quote me on this, but they had at the time they had 600 or 700, 800 different stores across the western United States. And, it was very obvious that we couldn't get, there's 3 or 4 of them in just about every decent-sized community. It was very clear that we couldn't in a year's time get to all of the stores. And they right away said, well, what would it take to put a different second Boss on the road? And I said, well, I'd rather not just do another Boss truck. I'd rather do a different truck. And I don't know how we came up with the name Rocket. I guess Rocket Fuel and the fuel, and there's the gas station or something. And, but they, at the time when we built the Boss, they were doing some kind of a thing in the stores. They had an in-store promotion about be the Boss, They had these Boss coffee cups and Boss this and Boss that. So the Boss really fit in good,
You also kind of popularly now, especially with social media, have shared, and if you go on your online store, there's some concept art for some trucks that never came to be. Are there any deals you can kind of tell us about some of those?
Yeah, that's funny. Well, they just talked about the other day, somebody, I sell them, and actually I've sold a lot of them, and how I sell them is I don't sell the original art because that's disservice to Larry Erickson that drew them for me.
Right.
They were really for me, and if my kids want to sell them or something down the line, it doesn't really matter. But what I do is I take and get very high-quality photos, which actually cost about $25 a piece to get done at Kinko's, and then they're delivered right to anybody's local Kinko. So the people that got them have been really happy with them because they're very, very high-quality, high-resolution photos. So they're very great for framing and stuff. Where ours were done with watercolors and pen and pencil. They're not that high. They wouldn't frame up as well as these pictures do. But anyway, yeah, the GMC one that was just talked about on social media the other day, they said they wanted to sponsor a truck. And so then we did the concept drawings for them, sent it to them. We had a meeting with them. They actually gave us a Suburban to drive as part of our sponsorship deal. We had that Suburban for about 4 years. But they went ahead and decided they would like to sponsor the events. Those have GMC trucks all over the events, and rebadge the boss. Instead of coming out with a truck that was all them, that drawing kind of shows whatever year it was, 1989 or something, the brand new version of a GMC truck made into a monster truck. They kind of decided that they wanted to actually have banners at all of our shows, give us a Suburban, be sponsored by GMC trucks, and then rebadge. We put a GMC grill on the boss and put a GMC tailgate on the boss, and did a lot of displays. But they mainly wanted to bring the monster truck to different displays, launches and ride and drives and the SEMA show and stuff like that. They thought that they got more mileage out of that, which was fine. But the one thing that was really interesting is that this was really early on. And this was even before, I believe it was before the AMP and Boss. I was introduced to Roger Penske, and of course Meredith, she opened a lot of doors. She was with me in Guelph Garrison, introduced me to Roger Penske, and we went into his suite, or his pit row suite, or whatever it was, at the Long Beach Grand Prix. And it was one of the first years of the Bandit. The Skull Bandit #1, the 58 Cameo. So he was all over it. He goes, I want a Penske monster truck. What can you do? And we did a handshake on it and everything, which is no hard feelings. And really, he's a really nice guy.
Right.
Really big picture guy. He's a 30,000-foot guy or whatever. And, we put the deal together. There's no problem. I'll cut you a check on Monday, whatever, and this, that, and the other thing. Well, then some of the people in his organization, his gatekeepers or insurance people and stuff, they, somebody down the ladder put a squelch on it. They just thought that the liability was a little bit out there, and they didn't see the direct correlation with their marketing I don't know, I can't remember exactly the words. I've got the letter somewhere, but their marketing objectives didn't align, and I kind of got it. We got it. It's one of those things. Hey, not everything happens you want to happen, but I think they didn't see the value of it for their customers at the time. And in the early days, to be truthful with you, Bob George and those people with SRO Pace, Tony Mancuso and stuff, real nice people, don't get me wrong, but we had a meeting with them at New Orleans when we first launched the Skull Bandit, and they go, well, what are you going to pay us to bring your truck to our shows? I go, what are you talking about? They wanted us to pay them because they said, hey, you've got a sponsor. You're getting your way paid or something. And Meredith and I said, well, wait a minute. We're adding some value to your sport. When they see the Skull Bandit out there, these other trucks like Monster Corvette, Frankenstein, these kind of other people can go and say, hey, Marlboro or Coors Light or Budweiser, let's run against the Skull Bandit truck or something. We're starting this whole thing. You guys should be embracing this. Well, they didn't. They made it real hard on us. They said, we'll pay you $1,500 for this. And thank God U.S. Tobacco Company really didn't care if we went to those shows or not.
Did that create any stir for you as an owner when, say, about 1990, late 89, I think, when Camel jumped onto the USHRA series, you guys were prominent there, but was there any trouble because Camel was a sponsor and you ran just pretty much sponsored trucks?
Oh, there might have been some stuff that we did. By then we kind of made amends with them because, in all fairness, the Bandit, it was more or less it was an experiment. It was too short wheelbase. It was under torqued. The Jaguar didn't have a lot of. We changed that out after the newness war. We did it to. Hey, there's no other Jaguar V12. There's no other 58 Cameo. We did it for the splash effect, and then after the splash effect, we quickly realized that we needed to have a big block Chevy in it.
Right.
To be effective. And I think it all kind of went away when our second gen, what I call our second gen trucks, the Skull Bandit 2 and the Boss and the Rocket, those trucks started running hard, and so they kind of looked the other way. And you know, I can't remember what trucks we ran on the Camel Tour, but you know, it's just they pretty manipulated where you ran and the points you get. And, you know, they pretty much controlled, you know, which trucks, and there was some hard running trucks in Barefoot and Bigfoot. You know, those guys have always been first on race day. You know, they always came there to win. You know, we didn't necessarily, although, you know, Jimmy ran the Eliminator hard and Gary Sarton ran the Bandit hard. We always kind of had in the back of our mind that there was a Monday, you know, and any driver that we hired that didn't have the respect of Monday in cleaning the truck, keeping the trucks really shiny and putting the white letters on the tires, and just wanted to go out and race, they didn't last very long with us. And there's a couple of them that we had let go very early in their career because, you know, they thought it was all about winning races, and while it was, we wanted to go and do a good showing. And I never got mad at Jimmy or any other driver that came in second at Bigfoot or Barefoot or any of the trucks that ran hard, because they knew that I wanted to keep the truck together. I mean, you know, there was a lot of tore up transmissions and broken axles and tore up rear bumpers, and, you know, those things just happen, and ruined tires, and all those things come with the sport. But I definitely didn't want them to just think, hey, this is the last day of my life, it's hammered down, we got to win the Camel Series. You know, it just didn't matter to us that much.
Now, that you brought up some interesting things there, and you guys always notoriously had very shiny, good trucks, but there was I think Jim Reese had a curse in Anaheim 2 years in a row and broke in two new trucks by crashing them. What was the atmosphere, as far as what you can share, what was the atmosphere from your end when you would get a phone call or when you were there and a truck did end up getting damaged badly?
Well, that Anaheim thing, I can remember it like it was yesterday. My daughter, who is now 37, she was about, I'm going to say 7 or 8, maybe. And so the Eliminator was brand new, and I mean, we threw a bunch of money at that, and so did Ecology Auto Wrecking, and it had the best of everything, and the motor was, you know, George Striegel built our motors from Clay Smith Engineering, and the motor was just dead on, and I mean, we really felt that truck was like state of the art. And unfortunately, we figured out later, of course, that we didn't have time to really test it and everything, but the axles were a little bit narrow and the tires were a little bit overinflated, and it was like a beach ball, you know. But so we were up in the suite with all these sport people and everything, and this is kind of a funny story. These people, my daughter's going around and she's got these pictures of the Eliminator, and all these people have Bigfoot shirts on, and Ford, and all these Ford officials are up there. And so she's making these bets with these guys that the Eliminator is going to beat the Bigfoot. You know, this truck is the hottest thing going, and you know, they were all, okay, we'll take up $1 a pencil. I'll bet you this pencil or whatever. You know, they were kidding each other. They thought it was pretty cute. And I mean, when that truck rolled over, I mean, you could have heard a pin drop in that whole, and it wasn't even at the race. I think it was at the qualifying that rolled, if I remember right. And it was pretty devastating. And you know, she just looked at me and she started bawling. And I go, Alexis, this is what racing is all about, you know. And all these older men came over to her and hugged her and said, hey, you still won. I love your truck better than Bigfoot. And these guys all like really fell for her, you know, because it was a pretty special moment. But yeah, it's one of those things you learn about. And you know, we ran it in primer for the first part of the season. I mean, I got to hand it to Jim Reese. You know, he wanted to run it that night, and you know, Jim Harris, who ran this track for SRO Pace, wouldn't let him. But he punched out the windshield. He still wanted to run. They wouldn't let him. That was fine. So we took it back and put it all in primer and made it to San Diego the next weekend. And it ran hard all year long. And you know, you learn from those kind of things. But that time, and Gary Sarton did a front over Indo at Fresno because he did a hard break and went over front ways, and that kind of break in Gary. I think he retired soon after that, and it break in you know, of course, I've said this before. I've actually driven over cars in a monster truck once, just out in the practice field, but I've never ever crushed cars. I didn't have any. I was a bullfighter and a clown, so I got paid to beat up my body. There was no way I was going to strap myself into a truck. You know, I got to hand it to Meredith and all the drivers that did that. Now these guys are doing backflips and stuff. Just makes me busy. But
you as a bull rider found strapping yourself in a monster truck.
Yeah, a little bit over the top, but I always enjoyed the marketing of it. And like I said, it was part of the deal. Of course, you don't like that happen. We blew a motor in Detroit one year because it wasn't properly heated up before they fired it up, and you know, so that there was a lot of transmissions and a couple of motors here and there. But all in all, I think we ran pretty hard for 10 years, as hard as any teams run. We had up to 15 different trucks through those 10 years. And, that rollover in Anaheim, the rollover at Fresno, the front endo that Gary did, and a few fenders here and there, and back bumpers and some tires, and a lot of transmissions, and one motor that I know for sure that we actually grenaded at the event. Other than that, we were real lucky. But I think, like I said, there's two elements that made our teams, and that was, we had really good drivers that respected their equipment, and we had Jim Reese that built in good equipment to go out and run with, and then George Striegel, at Clay Smith Engineering, he really knew what he wanted out of the motor. He knew how to put it all together, put all the percentages together and stuff, and we were lucky. He was right next door to our shop in Plano Park there, so it was a no-brainer,
Now, we talked about some of the trucks that you had intentional sponsors on. Tell us a little bit about Hawaiian Punch.
Okay, well, the first truck I bought from Brian Cardiff was, and he's a real nice guy, too. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but I don't know how I found out his truck was for sale, but he wanted to sell it. And, I talked to Jimmy, and Skoll was bugging us for a second truck, and I said, hey, we can get this for X, and Jimmy goes, God, I can't even start to build one for that. Let's get it. Let's run it. I'll build another one, all that. So we went ahead and bought the Cardiff Giant. Well, then he went and took that money, I guess, and built the Hawaiian Punch. So I guess at some point, I don't think we ever hired him we hired him at shows, because I started putting on, we had the first ever monster truck only show at the California State Fair, because they called me and they heard that I had a monster truck, and they said, hey, we've got about 4 nights during the week. We want you to do a monster truck show there. So you can't do a show with just monster trucks. Oh, yes, you can. We only need 45 minutes. Blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that. So, well, no, they're just like the icing on the cake of a tractor pull. So they talked me into it, and we ended up doing it. We sold out like 4 nights in a row on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or something during the week. So, and then we ended up doing 45 shows a year with this Monster Truck Madness tour. So because of that, I ended up getting back to the story, with Brian Cardiff and some of these other people. So Brian was at a show, and we bought that truck. And I don't think we ever used Hawaiian Punch. We might have. I can't remember. It had those real boxy Firestone tires on it and stuff. And somehow or another, we found out it was for sale. And he didn't have any sponsorship with Hawaiian Punch. I think a local bottler or something kind of either graciously allowed him to call it Hawaiian Punch or whatever. But as soon as we got it, we found out that there wasn't any kind of formal agreement with Hawaiian Punch. So we bought it, and then it had a real crispy motor in it. And we went to Hawaiian Punch, and we talked to them for, I'm going to say 6 weeks, had a lot of meetings in downtown LA with them, and blah, blah, this, and we put a package together for them, but they weren't into it for some reason. I think a little bit of it was they're kind of saying, oh, well, it's already built, so, you're out there, and, we're not paying anything, and you're kind of getting exposure. So we immediately took it, and I went to Goodyear, and Goodyear had been kind of talking to us about a truck, that they wanted a truck that we could, because we've been taking our trucks to Goodyear open houses at their factories and sale days at their dealerships, and just our other trucks, we got a tire deal with Goodyear through the NASCAR, because Goodyear was a sponsor of their IndyCar racing, the Skoal IndyCar racing, and the NASCAR IndyCar racing, or NASCAR racing. So we automatically got into that. So they gave us free tires for the haulers, free tires for the trucks, free tires for the chase vehicles. You know, I mean, it was an amazing deal. That was like the best deal. I just called and said, I need 10 of these and 5. I mean, you're talking about semi-truck tires that are, you know, now $400, but back then they were $200. You know, they would just send us a big truckload of them. But anyway, so they've kind of been. I got close to them. They'd kind of been talking to us about, oh, we'd like to have just a Goodyear truck, a truck that's all badged Goodyear. So that was like right about the time we got the Flying Eagle. So I went to them and said, hey, how about the Flying Eagle? The Hawaiian Punch, we'll just paint that white and call it the Goodyear Flying Eagle. They go, we love it. Do it. Let's do it. So, you know, in a weekend we painted it white and it was a Goodyear Flying Eagle. And we ran it that way till we sold it to those folks in Japan.
Now, you acquired some other trucks over the years. Let me start with Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, you know, I'm not exactly sure. I remember the first place we ever ran Lethal Weapon was at the Montana State Fair. But we met Jerry Richmond. We put on an event at St. Joseph Fairgrounds in Elkhart, Indiana, or right around Elkhart, Indiana. It's close to Elkhart, Indiana. We did it. We co-sponsored it. We kind of co-produced it with somebody back there that got a hold of us. They wanted to do the biggest monster truck show, and it was documented in a bunch of magazines. I think this was 86 or 7. It was documented in all kinds of magazines. At that time, it was the largest gathering of monster trucks ever. I think we had 32 monster trucks. We had a monster trike there. It was a pretty cool show. And that's where of course, we had to go out and hire all these trucks. You know, we hired Samson and Lethal Weapon. Maybe it was called Weapon 1 then, or so. I can't remember what it was called. But we met Jerry Richmond there, a real great guy, you know. And we already knew Fred Schaefer. Fred was there, and Fred was, you know, as far as I'm concerned, he was the number one guy out there. I mean, he was a guy, we stayed in his shop whenever we were traveling by. I mean, half the parts on our truck sometimes came out of his shop. We'd be back there, we'd need tire rod-ends or whatever. He'd just give them to us. He'd never take any money for it. And he's just like a super good guy. I mean, he and Kathy were just like really good people. But so at that show in Elkhart, we met Don Maples and we met Jerry Richmond. You know, we made a deal with them to come into the show. So at that point, we were doing these shows in California with 4 or 5 trucks. Most of them had 5 trucks. And so my idea was, hey, if we own all the trucks, then we kind of control the show. We don't have to worry about these. Some of these guys we hired would try to go out there and show off. And, you know, they were just dangerous for me as far as a safety factor, you know. So my idea was, hey, if we have 2 haulers, we haul 4 trucks. They're all our trucks. You know, we have really controlled costs and stuff like that. So it kind of was around the industry that we were looking to buy some other trucks. So Don Maples said, hey, I'd like to sell Samson, and that seemed like a pretty tight truck. And it was kind of like the Bandit. It was kind of like a flashy truck, but it was never going to win any races, you know. It had the big 77. So we made a deal with him there. I know this is what you're trying to get to. This is all common knowledge that Don, and the best thing that came out of Samson was Robert Parker. Robert Parker came to work for us. Don hadn't even let Robert Parker drive this truck off the hauler, you know. Robert Parker was like a tire jockey, but this kid, I just knew there was a lot of potential in Robert Parker. Really good guy, probably one of the top drivers we ever had. So Robert Parker kind of came with the deal, kind of like you buy a plantation, you get the guy working at the stable or something, you know. But Don said, hey, I've got, I don't even remember, let's say this was in late May, I can't remember when this show was, but I've got some shows that go through June that I've already paid, you know, they've already contracted me with them. He said, hey, you know, no problem. Go ahead and, you know, run the truck at those shows, and, you know, let's, you know, deliver it to us in California on this date or that date, or I don't know if we were going to come and pick up, whatever. We made some kind of a deal, right? he was going to work these shows through June, and then we were going to get it towards the end of June or whatever. No big deal. We gave him a check, down payment, and I said, hey, well, I'll pay you the second check when you deliver it. I can't remember how much money it was. I could look it up. But anyway, so then all of a sudden, about 3 weeks before we were supposed to take delivery of the vehicle, I can't get a hold of Don Maples on the phone. And, of course, this was before internet or email or texting or anything. So, then all of a sudden I get a call from Fred Schaefer or somebody in that area said, hey, I heard that Samson is parked behind Bigfoot's shop. So, still can't get a hold of Don Maples. It goes on. We're like 30, 60 days after when we were supposed to get the truck. I contact Bob Chandler, and he goes, oh, I bought the truck. I go, what do you mean you bought the truck? Oh, yeah, I bought the truck from Don Maples. I have the bill of sale. It's my truck, blah, blah, blah. So, the rest is history. We just hired a lawyer, and I think it took me about 3 times the money that the truck was worth to actually get the truck, and we ended up picking it up at the end of the year or whatever. We got it at some point. And it doesn't hurt me anymore. It bothered me at the time just because it just was unnecessary. It wasn't that. It was one of those things that's like 2 guys in the schoolyard fighting over a girl, and you find out she's not worth it. It was a good deal the way we set out to do the deal, but everything that it took for us to get the truck and then after we got it. So, but we ran it for about a year or 2 and then sold it. That's kind of what we wanted to do because we wanted to have different trucks every year, just like Barefoot. People were confused about Barefoot. We had a Barefoot truck for a year because we leased it from Barefoot to run our shows because that would have been cheaper than Himson. He liked our drivers. He liked Jimmy. We got along really well. He knew we'd take care of the truck. We delivered it in better shape, or the same shape that we got it in. He knew we'd do that, so he felt comfortable doing that. Well, that would have been better than him. He made more money us doing that than if he had to send the driver out there and put him in a hotel and paid all the expenses, But, and then the lethal, I think lethal weapon, if I remember right, that was quite a bit after the whole Samson fiasco. And it was just a straight up that, Jerry wanted to scout hold of us myself. I always liked that truck. That truck was a nice put together truck, and that was, kind of got to the end of the era of the spring trucks, and it was very well balanced. And, we got that and we ran it as lethal weapon for a year, and then we sold the Copenhagen Skull Crusher to Japan, and then we painted it Copenhagen Skull Crusher and ran it Copenhagen Skull Crusher for a year, then sold it, or changed it into Beverly Hillbillies truck, and then we painted Ecology Eliminator Copenhagen Skull Crusher for a year or 2, and we sold the Eliminator as the Copenhagen Skull Crusher, and then it went to a guy back east somewhere, and he ended up selling it back to Ecology Eliminator. Ecology bought it back. I don't think he ran it very much. I don't know what he did with it. I think he kind of had it parked in front of his house or something. And then when Ecology brought it back, they had Jimmy go all through it, put it back to the Ecology Eliminator, repaint it, freshen up the motor, freshen up all the chrome. I mean, they spent $50,000 on it when we got it back for them. I don't know what they paid for. And now Jimmy owns that truck again. Jimmy's bought it back from Ecology, just parked it. They took it. They didn't. I don't think they ever crushed any cars with it after they got it back. But they took it to swap meets and car shows and used it for they have an auto recycling yard. And then now Jimmy's got it back. He doesn't. He's just going to keep it as a treasure, I guess.
Tell us about some of your favorite guys you worked with, Jimmy, Warren, Steve Helm, some of those guys.
Well, Gary Sarton was the first driver that we hired other than Jimmy, and I hired, because I used to rodeo with Flying U Rodeo Company, and he worked for Flying U, and I knew he was a good truck driver, and we hired Gary Sarton. He drove the Skull Bandit, the first Skull Bandit 1. And I don't know how we found Steve Helm. He was a really good driver, and he was with us for a long time. So was Gary, and he drove the Cope Skull Crusher from the very beginning. And he might have just either got a hold of us or walked up to us at a monster truck show or something. I'd have to ask him. He's on Facebook. You could ask him how he found out about us. But he was a really quality guy, really cared about the product. He and Jimmy got along real well. Warren Davis was another guy that came from the rodeo end of it, he was a really good truck driver. And he came towards the end. Real good guy. And, of course, I said Robert Parker. We got him through and he went on to drive a digger truck. Mm-hmm. Bobby Z was working for Kurt Dabney, and Kurt Dabney came out with the Giant, and Bobby Z was just his tire jockey, and we really got along with Bobby. His name was Zollner or something, and so Mike Galloway actually gave him that tag, Bobby Z, because he couldn't pronounce Zollner. So we called him Bobby Z, the rock and roller controller. And he was a really good guy, a fun guy. And I think he was in the business for quite a while after we shut down. But, that was two reasons. There's two major reasons we got out of the monster truck business. One was it was all sponsor driven, okay? Well, the trucks were moving away from display trucks. They were moving into the plastic one seat in the middle of the Halloween body truck, fiberglass body truck and stuff. So it wasn't something you could put down at the tire store or the AMPM, open the door, and people could take pictures climbing in and out of it. It lost that kind of involvement with the public. So I could see that happening, number one. And number two is we were going to have to start going to those stage of trucks if we were going to still run with Madison Square Gardens, who was running the operation then before they sold to Feld. So that was one thing. The other thing is it got really hard to get drivers. I mean, the last 2 years we were in business, Jimmy had to fly out. We had to fire drivers and stuff because they were locked in hotel rooms and drinking it's not an easy job because everybody, when they look at it from the outside, they think, oh, man, monster truck drivers, get my picture taken and racing and stuff. But it was more cleaning and tires taking on and off and loading and unloading. And there was more back work than there was holding onto the steering wheel. For us, for our team. Now, it's not that much for bigger teams and Bigfoot and those guys maybe as much. But for our teams, it was hard to get guys who would have a clean CDL, truck driving license, be responsible, keep the trucks clean, be at displays on time, be representative of the company, which these guys I mentioned did. I didn't mention any of the names of people who didn't, but there was 5 guys that, I wouldn't hire to clean my windows on my car at the gas station, they did so it got really hard to get guys. They weren't lining up, and I thought we paid pretty well. I can't remember what we used to pay them, but obviously all their expenses were paid and stuff. But, they got to go in the suite at the Indy 500. They were a little bit of celebrities, but anyway, so that was the 2 reasons we really got out of it. Because it just was at a time, our business, the mail order business, which was, was kind of the launching pad for all of this, it, gone from 10 employees to 40 employees. It was really busy. It was taking a lot of Jim's time, Jimmy Reese's time, and my time. The pickup parts were before we had lots of spare time. It was kind of just stumbling along. Well, now it's been gotten into a big business. And so, it needed more of our attention too. But
now, you mentioned Mike Galloway in there, and you guys were very prominent on that Bud Sports coverage that ESPN did, and then later with Larry Huffman and Brett Kepner. You did some segments with Mike Galloway. If you could tell us a little bit about what it was like working with Mike, if you did.
Well, Mike has gotten to be, we still talk weekly. It's gotten to be one of my closest friends next to Jimmy that I have. And it's kind of a funny story how I was at Anaheim before I even knew who Mike Galloway was. I was at Anaheim. This is long before the rollover, and I heard Mike Galloway announcing, and I went to C.E. Altman, who ran the show for SRO Pace, big, tall Texan guy from Houston, and he was with Pace, actually. Pace and SRO went into, SRO was out of Arkansas, Little Rock, and Pace was out of Houston, and Pace, they had the dates, and they used SRO at these dates at Anaheim Stadium and stuff, and so anyway, I told C.E. Altman, I said, hey, who's that announcer? He goes, oh, it's Mike Galloway. Because he knew I was putting on these, what he would call little punk and roll little shows in California, these little fair shows, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I said, man, that guy's a great guy. Yeah, you can't afford him, he says. I'm not even going to introduce you to him. You can't afford him. I said, okay. Well, so Meredith and I went over at the elevator, but they come down from the announcer stand and waited there for Mike to come down. And I had no idea what he looked like. Didn't even know anything about him, and all of a sudden this guy comes down with his satchel, and I said, oh, are you the announcer? He goes, yeah, and I introduced myself. I said, I got to tell you, man, you're one of the best, the best I've ever heard, blah, blah, this, blah, that. And I gave him my card, and I said, hey, we do these little shows in California. We're doing about 10 a year. Now, this is in January, so probably after our first year of shows, we did about 10. The next year, we did 45. I said, I'd really like to have you announce our shows, and they start in about May, and they run all summer long, you know. We had the Michigan State Fair this one year and all this stuff, and he goes, okay. And I go, he says, yeah, I think I can do those. And I go, well, what do you want? He goes, oh, we'll figure it out. And so there was 10 years that he worked for us, sometimes 45 shows a year. We never ever had a contract, never ever talked about what he wanted to do a show. We would just always fly him out, pay all his expenses. I hand him a check on Sunday. He'd look at it and goes, hey, thanks a lot, that's great. I said, is that enough? Oh, that's perfect. I mean, for the whole time we worked together, we never ever had a contract, never talked about, hey, what would you charge to do this or do that? And anyway, it's been a great, we still, we get together every year. He comes out for SEMA, and we spend a couple of days together. Just a real special guy. He made the shows. Like I used to tell everybody, you go to some of these, even the monster truck shows they have now, not the monster jams, but the ones that are just at the county fairs and stuff. Mm-hmm. You can have just the worst trucks ever out there, and not getting any air or whatever. But if you've got a good announcer, he will have people on the end of their seats, But you can have the best show ever, and if you don't have a good announcer, it doesn't seem like a very good show. So I can't say enough for him. And it surprised me that now I know why Feld. It's just nothing but a bunch of hollering now, kind of. But you go to shows now, they don't even tell you, blown supercharged, this, that. They don't even tell you the truck specs because they're all exactly the same. They're pretty much the same vehicle with a different body on it. Right. But back in the day, Galloway he'd get people fired up. How Ford fans, Chevy fans, blown 382, this, that, and he'd tell them all the facts. He really built the sport up. We had people going to town that would want his autograph more than they'd want the driver's autograph, because they just knew that voice,
You kind of mentioned what drew you out of the sport. At any point, have you been interested in getting back into it, be it a race truck or a display truck, or are you kind of comfortable where you left off?
Well, I kind of look at life as like a whole bunch of chapters. I've done a lot of things, and I guess there's been times when there's about couple hundred people on Facebook and stuff that get after me about this and that. Wouldn't it be nice? And they'll chime in about stuff, and I think it'd be great to get like an old school monster truck tour kind of going, and have some of the old door slammers and do that. But the reality of it is, can you live on it or make enough money to live? And will people really come out for it? If these people are used to seeing backflips and things like that, I don't know if it's even exciting to you. It was exciting to us, and one thing is that the last 5 years I've tried to nominate me for the Hall of Fame, you know, and I just said, get somebody else in there or whatever, you know, just, I feel like that, I've done a lot of things in my life, and my value isn't attached to monster trucks only, not to mention that the Hall of Fame is somewhere where nobody that I know is ever going to see it, but the most flattering thing for me is not that. The most flattering thing for me is when just somebody out of nowhere sends me a message on Facebook and said, hey, I was there at Medford, Oregon, or I was there at Anaheim when your trucks pulled in there, and, you know, Bigfoot was there, and other trucks were there, but I could tell your trucks were show trucks, you know, and that, to me, that's like better than any Hall of Fame, you know, acknowledgement or anything, that these people still, 30 years later, remember when they saw the empty emboss with the flashing lights on top, and the chrome was shiny, the tires were shiny, and that we really cared about. And, you know, it's funny, Jimmy and I talked about it before, that we never really went there with that intention. We just built trucks the way we thought they should be done and kept them clean, like the way, you know, we weren't trying to, you know, outshow anybody or anything. This is just the way we did it. And so it's kind of interesting that just doing what we did made an impression on people. I think that's the highest form of flattery. So whether I get back in it, sure, if the things are right, I'd love it. You know, in fact, just not too long ago, somebody asked me to put a show together in a California city. And I said, yeah, I'll try to put something together for you. But, you know, it's tough now because, you know, the kind of money the fairs have to spend has not gone up that much from those years, you know.
Right.
So, but the trucks are now, instead of $1,500 a truck, they're getting $3,000 a truck, which is worth it. I'm not saying that they don't deserve that. So, but I'm just saying, when you add those things together, you know, they don't have the money to put a $30,000 or $40,000 show on.
Right.
It used to cost $17,000, you know. So.
Todd Blazer started with you as well. He went on to drive for Fred. I know. Can you tell us a little bit about Todd?
Yeah, Todd. God, I can't. Some of this stuff is a little bit foggy, but he was an ATV racer that somehow or another got a hold of us because we were doing ATV racing in between the monster truck stuff, and then he said, "Hey, I can jump cars too," and so we had him start. He ran with us for quite a while, just racing his ATV and jumping cars with his ATV, with his four-wheeler. And then when we got the Hawaiian Punch, we needed a driver for that. He started driving the Hawaiian Punch.
Right.
And then he drove, I don't know, Warren Davis drove the Barefoot when we had Barefoot. I don't know how he got with Fred. I guess he just went with Fred. And I can't even remember if he was there with us till the end or he left before we actually got out of the monster truck business, or exactly when Todd left. But he's a really good guy. He's still a friend of mine on Facebook, and real quality guy, real great personality, great people person, and you know, he did a real good job for us. He drove just about all of the trucks at one time or another, and a good driver. And I actually, you brought us, I didn't even remember that he drove for Schaefer. He was racing. So that's right. Now I remember he did race for Boehner. Because Boehner had a girlfriend that was racing a Hot Stuff Jeep. It was Hot Stuff, and what was the other one?
High Voltage.
High Voltage.
Still around, I believe.
Yeah. So his girlfriend was racing High Voltage, and he broke up with his girlfriend, and then Boehner went to work. He went to work for Boehner racing the Jeep, the extra Jeep he had. That's right. And I think he started racing that Jeep when Boehner would come to us.
Okay. That was.
We hauled his Jeeps for a while. We hauled Jeff's 2B. And Jeff and I still talk off and on all the time. We hauled Jeff's Jeeps on our hauling rigs to our shows a lot to help him out.
Thanks for your time, Seth.
All right.
Hope to see you down the road.
Anytime. You bet. Thanks.
All right. Have a good night, sir.
You too. Bye-bye.